I talk about Voxbone and some of the things that we're working on, with all the discussion about bots and improving the user experience, I want to talk about user experience a little bit. And in some ways, actually in a lot of ways, I think the original phone systems like 100 years ago probably had a better user experience than a lot of what we deal with now. If you think about it, I don't know if you've seen movies or been in a museum and seen some of the original phones, but basically you walk up to the phone, you pick it up, and you talk and you say, who do you want to talk to, right? And someone on the other end connects you to that person, right? There's no dialing, there's no logging in, there's no registering, right? There's none of that, right? You just go to the phone, who do you want to talk to, and you get to the other side, right? Now, of course, the magic and secret behind that, there's an operator that was actually connecting your call and taking care of that for you, right? And that's a lot what we're trying to replicate today with bots, but hiring a lot of operators like that is expensive, right? So we went down the path of dialing and creating routing rules and all this to let users do this stuff on their own. And the rotary dialing, hurts fingers, takes a lot of time. So we evolved, right? And we got the DTMF. Like how great actually now. So now you can just push a button, you hear a pleasant multi-tone instead. And sadly, like the state of the art, I mean, we really haven't evolved much beyond that user interface, right? I mean, this is an app that you can get for an Android device that looks like an iOS dialer, right? Because that's the best dialer. Like this is the state of the art. If you're in the enterprise, you're even luckier, right? You get more buttons, right? With all the technology, all the things that we have, the best you can get is more buttons. And it's kind of disappointing that if you look at Star Trek episodes from the '60s, they had this communicator where you just pick it up like the original phone, you say who you want to talk to, and you're talking to that person, right? And with all the evolution of the web and all artificial intelligence and speech recognition, we still don't have this communicator, right? We're still making things hard. So in some ways, it's no wonder if you look at who's winning in communications today, it's those companies that are focused on that user experience and making things very seamless and simple and improving things, right? And Facebook is definitely a good example of this, leveraging a huge social network, but realizing, hey, wait, actually trying to bundle in communications, and forcing that to be part of the same social media stream doesn't make as much sense as actually separating that out and actually having an independent application to handle that. So in just a few years now, they're up to 300 million monthly active users, right? Which is a pretty big number since they started from zero, right? But I don't want to depress everyone. Actually, I think this is exciting, right? Because new technologies create new opportunities, right? We have more chances than ever to create cool new things and great new user experiences. And I'm a big advocate of WebRTC. Alan talked about my blog, and I've been here a bunch of times talking about WebRTC in the past, right? But I see this as one of several key technologies and new capabilities and tools that we have to create some of these new user experiences. So with that, I guess that brings me to Voxbone. And many of you probably have heard of Voxbone before. I mean, Voxbone's been around for a little bit more than a decade. If you're not familiar with Voxbone, Voxbone is basically a global VoIP provider. It provides phone numbers, DIDs, phone numbers, and SIP trunks in more than 60 countries. All right. Voxbone's been doing this for a long time. It operates, it actually owns its own server. It runs its own servers, runs its own backbone and own network, VoIP first type infrastructure. And beyond, just the basic, DIDs and phone number services, they've, grown into other areas such as SMS and emergency calling and other new features. And Voxbone's typical customers and applications, it's actually a huge variety. There's close to 1,000 customers now, spans from call centers, enterprises, conferencing service providers, cloud PBXs, and telecom application providers. And it's really the telecom application providers that I want to focus on, and that's really the most germane and most relevant to the TADS audience here, obviously. So let's zoom in. I guess take a closer look at some of these, and you'll see some familiar names and faces on the list here. And this is just the public list. I can say with confidence, Voxbone, is provides DIDs and services for the vast majority of telecom API providers out there in the world. Right. So we've heard a new term lately that's been thrown around a lot. It's a communications platform as a service. This is essentially, someone who offers communications to telecom APIs as a service to other developers, other parties, right? So I'm going to talk a little bit about communications platform as a service and what that is and what we should do. And say, I'll jump into what I'm doing at Voxbone in a minute, but one big question was, is Voxbone a CPaaS? Should Voxbone get into the CPaaS market? And in some ways, Voxbone is already a CPaaS because Voxbone offers APIs. You can purchase and provision your phone numbers and SIP trunks via API. So that's kind of a CPaaS. But the same way, a lot of Voxbone's customers basically take that same functionality and wrap it up and offer the same thing to their customers, right? So we're kind of in between. So and looking at this, CPaaS can mean a couple different things, but certainly if you take Twilio as an example, with a little close to $3 billion, I mean they've been dropping probably close to $2.7 billion market cap right now. That's certainly pretty impressive. And we've talked about Nexmo being acquired for $230 million, and there's easily another $100 to $200 million worth of CPaaS acquisitions that have happened over the last 5 years or so, right? So CPaaS is a business model, but I think the big question is there's a lot of CPaaS companies out there. Almost every telecom infrastructure vendor in some form or another is moving into doing some sort of CPaaS. And does the world really need another CPaaS out there? We have quite a few. Do you need it? How many of those do you really need? But I think it's important to remember that CPaaS and telecom APIs are more than just a business model, right? They're also a technology approach. And some of you might have heard of microservices, right? I mean, this is an IT, more general IT technology trend, right? And the trend here is similar to some other themes you might hear around NFV, but the idea of making services that are small and composable, right? And making these in a way that it's not just about the services, it's also building a culture around being able to use these services and making things that can go away quickly, and things that be able to be built in an independent fashion, so you can have multiple independent teams working on things, right? And you can fail, and one component can fail or make mistakes without it taking down the entire network, right? So this overall microservice philosophy has been around for a while. And microservices are really the way to do IT, right? I think in a lot of ways these aren't new concepts that we haven't heard before, right? This is how people do things in general. And APIs are the way that you implement microservices, right? And telecom is just another service, right? It needs another API. So telecom APIs are really just the way that you implement communications inside the IP domains, right? So with that philosophy, we really looked and say, all right, well, Voxbone has 15 or 20 CPaaS customers, right? There's a lot of growth there, but is there any reason why there shouldn't be 500 CPaaSs? Is there any reason why all 1,000 customers shouldn't be CPaaSs out there? And we think they all will be CPaaSs, right? If they won't be a CPaaS, and they'll first need to be a CPaaS for themselves, right? As they offer their own services and figure out how to improve and evolve their own infrastructures and their own offerings, they need to be a CPaaS to themselves. And some of them will choose to take that same architecture and that same approach and offer it externally. So behind that philosophy and that thinking, I joined Voxbone to help enable some of this. And we initiated a program that we call the Workshop, right, where we're working on a lot of these newer concepts and newer ideas and doing a lot of experimentation, right? Because certainly this is all new ground. It's just happening, and we want to figure this out together with our customers and our partners. So we're focused on three main areas. First is WebRTC, right, and adding WebRTC as another way of accessing customers and improving the user experience. There's a whole another set of area that we're working on of APIs, right, and we call these offload APIs because in most cases doing things like recording and conferencing are their functionality that customers are doing already, right? These aren't new concepts, but there's a lot of opportunity for us to help customers offload them from our network and improve them, right? So we call them offload APIs. And the third domain is just cloud infrastructure in general. So Voxbone's been implementing an OpenStack architecture. We often get asked, can we co-locate with your gateways to help reduce latency and just make things easier, so we don't need to go out and find a data center or figure out how to best run things on Amazon or whatnot. So there's a whole other domain of building out some real-time communications first cloud infrastructure. And going down this path, we realize that there's a pretty big gap between using having just the basic cloud infrastructure, or using a public cloud, or setting your own up, and using somebody else's CPaaS, somebody else's APIs, like customers do today, right? So some of what we're trying to do here is one, add to the API set, add to the portfolio, and just make it easy. If you can go and order a phone number, a DID, in a couple minutes, why can't you add recording or conferencing and other capabilities on it just as quickly, just as easily, right? So we're working on some of those functionalities. We talked a little bit about leveraging our cloud infrastructure. So if customers, most of them today, they run their own infrastructure, right? They do a lot of this stuff on their own, but perhaps they don't want to have to worry about figuring out what data center to go to when they're expanding into China or Asia or wherever it might be. So if we have infrastructure, a data center there, they could potentially run on that, right? And I think there's a lot of very interesting things that can happen when you start to blend those two things together, right? Where then you do start to get more of a PaaS. But still, I don't see ourselves competing with Voxbone CPaaS customers, but I think there's a lot of opportunities to make it easy for customers to become CPaaS and provide them different layers and different levels that they want for their stack, depending on their unique business needs and based on their technology and their aptitude. So this is really a lot to take on. And we're trying to do a lot. This is a new market. It's moving fast. We have investors that expect results and want to do things. And at the same time, I didn't really start with much of a team. It was mostly me and trying to figure out how to pull all this together, how to go out there and provide something that can be a suitable platform or offering that someone could use. And to pull it off, we decided to go with a lean startup approach, really be like a startup, act like a startup inside the larger company, and be very nimble, very agile, and try to develop a bunch of these services and products in a time span of roughly 6 to 8 weeks from initial start to actually having customers using it and getting feedback, and then gather a lot of data and iterate and move on from there, right? So what I'll conclude with here is some of the lessons I've learned from this process. It certainly wasn't easy, right? And I was a consultant before I started at Voxbone, but I've been there since this summer. So we're really just in the middle of it. But a few things I'll walk through. So one thing that we discovered is making this group and this team autonomous. Being independent of the group. Turned out to be pretty important, right? Just because the timelines, what we're trying to implement, what we're trying to build is just very, very different than Voxbone's mainline business. It overlaps, right? It works with it, but it's a new team. We're trying to figure out something and potentially throw it away in a period of a couple months, right? And that's certainly not consistent with an established mainline business. So we found that trying to be, being autonomous, trying to be able to run and learn and do things on our own, and potentially having our own systems, right, and our own infrastructure when that makes sense, is really important. Another key theme that we adopted that is very relevant at Voxbone is open source. I mean, Voxbone's been basically an open source shop since the very beginning. I'm not too sure if there's much or any commercial infrastructure that they bought. I can say under the workshop, and we have looked at some commercial infrastructure, but in general, we find just leveraging open source, what's out there already, what works, just it moves faster for us. Oftentimes, in the amount of time it takes to talk to a commercial vendor, we can be playing around with it and have an open source platform up and going, right? And we that's how you learn requirements. That's how you understand how things work and how they might piece together and what you can do. So leveraging open source more than anything has helped us really cut down and reduce our timelines and get to market quicker. Another key thing that we found is leveraging contractors out there, finding the right people for the right job for a short period of time, right? And there's this huge emerging gig economy out there now where it's easier than ever to go find someone if you just need a web developer to help with things, or even if you need a VoIP or real kind of communications expert to help with specific assets. So we've done a lot of work, and as much as I'd like to hire and have a big team that's very focused, oftentimes it's just not practical, particularly when we're not totally sure what we want to do in 3 or 4 months, right? We know what we want to do in the next 2 months or the next 3 or 4, and maybe have some idea after that, but we're not totally sure longer. So it's turned out to be much more practical just to hire consultants and people on a short-term basis to help out. Now, this one is another one that's been surprising, maybe a little bit disappointing to me, since I am such a big WebRTC fan. But we have found there's just a lot of customers, a lot of people out there just aren't prepared for the web, right? They're not comfortable with web technologies. It's not something they've worked with, and not something they're familiar with. And as much as I work with WebRTC, one of the things that WebRTC requires on the web, if you use Chrome, is you have to have an SSL, a TLS. You have to run HTTPS and have a certificate. And I can't, I'm very, very surprised at the number of people I run into that don't know how to do that, right? Or they need help, or they need to go through, 2 or 3 other people to try to figure out how to do that. That all results in just slowing down the process, making things harder, right? So we found we had to do a lot more help than we anticipated to get people familiar with and comfortable with web technologies and help do it for them and walk them through them and go through that education process. So that's that's been really important and something we'll be doing a lot more of. Another key area is if I thought a lot of times you get the focus. All right, we got to build all these things. You figure out how to build it. In general, we've done a pretty good job of figuring out how to build new services and features and capabilities. Again, we're leveraging a lot of open source elements and components that are doing these things already. So it's just a matter of applying it and operating it to make it work. But one area that we probably haven't paid enough attention to that we're shifting on is you can build it, but it doesn't necessarily mean customers are going to show up. There are so many distractions, and it's really hard to just get attention. In general, when we get customers' attention, it goes very well, but getting their attention in the first place is very hard, and it takes a lot of persistence. So I guess another piece of advice, another thing that we learned is that you can't just build it. You got to put a lot of emphasis in making sure customers and people understand it and they take the time to go through and understand what it is. Right, which is comes down to just sales and marketing and coming to getting out there at events like this and getting in front of customers. So I guess one of the last things I want to leave too is. And one of the things I found is oftentimes results come from unexpected places. So one of our biggest WebRTC customers is actually a calling card company. And I don't know, when's the last time anyone here has anyone here used a calling card in the last year? Right? I can't even, I associate calling cards I haven't had a landline myself in ages, but that's like maybe 20 years ago, 30 years ago, I'm not that old, but 20 years ago. It seems old, but there's calling card companies out there, and if you ever use a calling card, and remember, we go back to my earlier part of the deck with the interface. You got to type in all these DTMF digits. It's a lot of code. It's pretty miserable, and people expect to be able to buy and upgrade and improve and purchase their cards online because you do your financial transactions online now. You buy things online. So this one calling card company decided to just add the ability to make calls online with WebRTC, right next to the area where you can go and just reload your card, right, and add more value to it. and it's been phenomenal. It's taken off really, really well. Surprisingly, actually, the majority of the users are on Android phones. Not even using a specialized app. They're just using the web browser. That's how they prefer to do it. And this has gone really well. I would never expected a calling card company would be our #1 WebRC user. But I think that's also exciting, right? Because if a calling card company can embrace a state-of-the-art technology like this, then there's really very little excuses for everybody else, right? So it's just a matter of figuring out how to get them there. So with that, that was one user experience that I was happy we can improve for those customers. You can reach me. I'll be around tonight. And I did want to remind everyone, we are, Voxbone's sponsoring the reception tonight. If you want to win a bottle of port or some nice Belgian chocolates, which are awesome, fill out the card, go hand it in to the Voxbone booth that's outside, which will be moving upstairs for the reception. There's a little question about me down there too. I hope that means I get some drinks for it also. But with that, thank you. I'll.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Chad. So to make sure we finish on time, if you could take your computer off so John can get set up. Do we have any questions for Chad? Oh, there's a mic on the table there. You can grab it. There you go. So there you go. You're sorted. So is it on? Just push it up. It should be a little. Cool. So back to the calling card, which is cool. And it's exactly, the innovations come from outliers. It doesn't come from the people you'd most expect. So how does the use case work? Is it simply just outbound calling using WebRTC? It's charged to the card. Just interested to understand how that use case works.
It's primarily the user has basically just goes to the website, clicks on a button, calls into the calling card company IVR.
Okay.
Right. I believe, and since you can pass all that contextual information through, there's no need to punch in all the information, right? And in a lot of cases, the user they have predefined destinations or locations there, so it just basically just passes them through.
Gotcha. So it just eliminates having to enter all that data up front.
So instead of going to the IVR and punching in 12 digits, whatnot, you get right through.
So for the user, it's transparent. They don't even have any knowledge of the call being placed with the browser. It's just this button, the call's set up. It's beautiful.
Yeah, and everyone carries around their phone. I mean, I don't know if everyone carries around a calling card so you can look at digits and all that, right?
Yeah. Exactly. Cool. Any other questions? If not, again, round of applause and congratulations on joining Voxbone.
Thank you.